Welcome to Non-Beta Alpha. I'm Ryan Morfin. On today's episode, we have Luke Brown from Brown Griffin Real Estate Advisors, a real estate developer located in Prosper, Texas. Luke just recovered from the coronavirus, and today he's going to share his thoughts and his story with us for our viewers. This is Non-Beta Alpha.
I guess I didn't know. I didn't know.
So, Luke, the treatment that the doctors gave you, could you talk a little bit about what you did to combat the high fevers and the cough?
Yeah, I was just using the NyQuil cough medicine. Didn't do anything. The only thing that helped was Tylenol. And the Tylenol would really knock the fever down. And I could tell when I was getting close to 4 hours because it would spike back up. So that's really all that I had. He gave me an antibiotic, a Z-Pack, and I took that, in 3 or 4 days. But I don't know what it did or if it did anything. Tylenol is the only thing that would help.
Interesting. And so, were you by yourself most of the time? Kind of self-quarantined?
I was, yes. Yeah.
So did you end up having to go to the hospital at all, or did you admit?
I did finally. I was never admitted. I just went and got my oxygen level taken. And they said anything 92 or below, they would admit me. And I was 94, 95. So they just sent me home. Oh,
wow. So you're right at that cusp there. And so you were lucky to get the test turned around pretty quickly because you were probably early on here in Texas. As you were kind of getting towards the end of this, I mean, what were you thinking in terms of watching the news? I don't know if you were watching the news or if you were sleeping it off, but what were your days like while you were at home by yourself?
Like I said, the only thing that was any relief, when it was nice weather, I'd go sit outside and I'd take a long hot shower. It's the only thing that really relieved the cough. Back in bed, patio, shower, bed. And I just did that for almost 2 weeks. I didn't really keep up with a bunch of it on the news. I'd watch, it was on every channel, so I saw a little bit of it, but I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to it during that time.
Yeah. Did you lose your appetite, or were you still eating, or what was the?
I lost my appetite. I ended up losing probably 16, 17 pounds, something like that. When I would eat, everything tasted super salty. So I don't know if that's just being sick or what, but there's nothing. So just a lot of Gatorade and stuff like that. Didn't eat a whole lot.
Were there any other unusual symptoms? Like some people are saying they've got blisters on their feet, or any other symptoms that you thought
would have been
it was like fever, where you just felt really sick and couldn't get comfortable. And the cough was the part that was, I couldn't get rid of it. It was just, if I was awake, I was coughing. And, when that finally went away, I was very thankful. That was the worst for sure.
So you lost about 5 or 10% of your body weight. So the doctors basically were saying, if you have under 92% or 92 score on your oxygen, come back in. But when they sent you home, did they give you things to watch out for to get your butt back into the hospital, or what was the guidelines?
When I pulled in to the hospital, I just went to one here just close to the house, but it was in Frisco. I was the only car in the parking lot. Now there was a parking garage I didn't go into, and I talked to the nurse, talked to the head lady before I came in. They knew I was coming, and they were nice, but you could tell they did not want me there. It was, I can check you in, but it's going to be $500. There's nothing we can do for you. If your oxygen's up, there's nothing. I said, that's fine. So they just put the thing on my finger. I was there less than 5 minutes. They didn't really take my name. It wasn't, I didn't get checked into the hospital. They just kind of did me a favor. They said, come back and check your oxygen anytime you're feeling like you can't breathe. But that, I was better probably 3 days later. I was fine. Or started to get better.
Were you able to drive yourself to the hospital, or did you have to have someone pick you up?
I drove.
And so, as you're starting to come on the tail end of this and the outside, and you're feeling better, uh, what has the guidance have the doctors given you about your ability to catch it again, or your being, if you're when the contagiousness goes away? Like what kind of guidelines did they give you on the back end of this?
My doctor, or the doctor that I used, and the lady from the county both said they didn't know. My doctor assumed, he said, I would assume you're good at least through the summer of this cycle, but they don't know how it's going to mutate or anything. He said, I would assume you do, but there's no test really yet. And he just didn't know. So that's the part I've been, trying to keep up on is, can I get it again? Do they need plasma? Do they need, I don't think anyone really knows, or haven't told us.
Yeah, no, it's still early. I think the CDC is still trying to get their arms around this as well. I mean, so were you at all, frightened for your life, or do you think that the way your body was handling it, you felt pretty comfortable, but you knew you were sick? I mean, was there an inflection point on your thinking, like, oh God, this is really bad outcome?
I got to a point where it felt like it would never end, and starting to just get mad rather than, I just wanted it to be over with, but I never felt like I was going to die. They kept saying, if it gets in your lungs and you're wheezing and you can't catch your breath, that's bad. And I never got there.
Oh, thank God. No, you're a pretty fit guy, going into this, and, losing the weight, but being knocked on your, knocked out of commission for a few days, definitely is probably a shock to someone who probably doesn't get sick very often. So as it relates to going back to work, I mean, what do you think? So you're one of the folks who've actually had this and survived. What do you think the country should be doing, I think, going forward? Should we go back to work, or do we need to continue the social distancing guidelines? What would you say for
I personally think
the outlook?
The right thing, shutting everything down, because they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know how overwhelmed the hospitals would be. I felt like I didn't go out. I didn't wash my hands. I did all that, stayed home, and I still got it. And I know people that had to work and worked through it, and they're just fine. So it's kind of random. It seems random that I got it, and a lot of other people didn't. But we're in the development, construction, real estate business, and those projects are 2-3 years long. You have to go. Those projects are still going, so we're staying busy and working. It seems like there's going to be some kind of middle ground of XYZ category needs to stay home another 30 days, and let's see where that takes us. And then if that works, maybe everyone, it seems to need to be phased out. I think cutting everyone loose to go concerts and games would be a little reckless at this point, but it needs to be phased in. I mean, some people need to be able to go back to work that are less likely to get it, in my opinion.
And so you're a construction general contractor and an investor. How do you think, now that you've had this personal experience, how do you plan to change kind of the operations or the tactical, way you handle a construction site? I mean, are you going to space people out further, work in greater shifts? What changes do you think you guys will be making as we go phase back into the economy? And in Texas, construction hasn't slowed down. It's been going continuously through this whole process. But you've got a special, optic on this because you've had it and lived through it. How do you think your company will handle this going forward?
Well, I think I could have done better in that, personally, in that 4 or 5 days before I got sick. I did have a cough, and I still went into work. Like I said, we didn't have office meetings or anything like that. I was never within 20 feet of anyone else. But I think if you're sick, you think you're sick, you need to stay home. On the construction sites, they're mostly all subbed out, third party subs. And so those companies run their own health, the way they see fit. But construction is a little bit different in that they're not all on top of each other. It's more of the people that are in direct contact is going to be in a different boat than we are, I think.
And given that you guys are very active in the real estate development space, how do you see the economic impact changing real estate? From a, rolling from construction financing to permanent financing. Are the banks still active? Are you still talking to your banks? What kind of concessions or what are they doing for construction developers?
Our banks have been great on working together. I mean, we've got some buildings that are just finished this month that are sitting there in shell condition, So some of the leasing seems to be still going on. I think a lot of the people that have their business, any kid-related business, boutiques, restaurant bars, those kind of guys that got shut down are in a bind. But people who are looking to start new seem to still be around. We're still getting offers for lease space and things like that. So our brokerage side, we don't have a whole lot of people looking for new land deals at the moment, but all of our construction projects are still going forward. And the leasing side seems to still be solid. So.
And I know this is a relatively, fresh phenomenon, less than, 60 plus days out, but do you think it's going to be harder to get permanent financing to roll the construction off once you finish these projects? And have you started to have those conversations with construction lenders?
No, we don't have any perm loans that haven't already been negotiated into, temporary loans that haven't been negotiated for the permanent financing. So we seem to be okay in our little bubble, but industry wide, I really don't know.
Yeah, I think it's perhaps too early to tell. People are still trying to get their arms wrapped around it.
They don't know heads from tails, or are the bankers working 14 hours a day kind of deal just to keep up. So asking them future questions is just out of their brain space right now.
Would you think it's safe to say that there's no new construction projects going to get kicked off in the next 90 days?
We've got some that have just broken ground. I mean, they're just doing the dirt work, and those are all moving forward. I can't say personally we have anything new that we're going to or not going to start because of this, in our company.
Yeah, you guys are in one of the most active areas in the country for growth, and I
talked to yesterday. Runs a big GC. He's a GC for a big company, and he said they've had some stuff tabled that haven't started. Some tens of million, $80, $90 million deals have been tabled, not stopped, but so there's a little bit of it for sure.
And have you continued kind of self-quarantine during this period of uncertainty, or have you started to kind of reintegrate with family and friends and loved ones to try to get some support?
Back with friends and kids and back at work and all that stuff. So.
Well, I'll tell you, thank God you're okay, and we appreciate you joining us. Wanted to share with our viewers, a good news story, because the media is only talking about the death toll and the infection rate, but people are surviving this, and I'm coming out on the other side. And I think it's the unknown that is driving people to maybe act irrationally. And we appreciate you joining us and sharing your story.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Luke. Good talking to you. Bye. Thanks for listening to Non-Beta Alpha. And before we go, please remember to subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or our YouTube channel. This is Non-Beta Alpha. Now you know.
Get busy time.
All price references and market forecasts correspond to the date of this recording. This podcast should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part. The information contained in this podcast does not constitute research or recommendation from Non-Beta Alpha Inc., Wentworth Management Services LLC, or any of their affiliates to the listener. Neither Non-Beta Alpha Inc., Wentworth Management Services LLC, nor any of their affiliates make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information contained in this podcast, and any liability, therefore including in respect of direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage is expressly disclaimed. The views expressed in this podcast are not necessarily those of Non-Beta Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC, and Non-Beta Alpha Inc. and Wentworth Management Services LLC are not providing any financial, economic, legal, accounting, or tax advice or recommendations in this podcast. In addition, the receipt of this podcast by any listener is not to be taken as constituting the giving of investment advice by Non-Beta Alpha Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC to that listener, nor to constitute such person a client of any affiliate of non-Beta Alpha Inc. or Wentworth Management Services LLC. This does not constitute an offer to buy or sell any security. Investments in security may not be suitable for all investors. An investment of any security may involve risk and the potential loss of your initial investment. Investors should review all risk factors before investing. Investors should perform their own due diligence before considering any investment. Past performance is not indicative of future results. Investment products, insurance, and annuity products are not FDIC insured, not bank guaranteed, not insured by a federal government agency, may lose value.